We expect to hear confirmation shortly on a go or no-go for propellant loading this evening.
Launch auto sequence has started.
T-minus 35 minutes and counting. We just heard the call from SpaceX Launch Control that launch auto has started. This is the start of propellant loading. So kerosene and liquid oxygen propellants now are flowing into the first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket out at pad 39A. Kerosene fuel is also being loaded into the second stage at this time. The liquid oxygen will not start loading into stage 2 until about T-minus 16 minutes. So 3 of the 4 propellant tanks on the Falcon 9 are currently being loaded with propellants in anticipation of tonight's launch opportunity at 9:20 a.m., 9:20 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:20 a.m. UTC. T-minus 31 minutes and counting. So tonight's mission is carrying 34 Starlink internet satellites into orbit, as well as Blue Walker 3, which is the first full-scale prototype spacecraft for a space-based cellular broadband network being developed by a company called AST Space Mobile. This satellite, as you see here, mounted to the Falcon 9's launch adapter. You can see part of the satellite in this image at the very top. And that black cylinder is the launch adapter structure that will actually connect to the Falcon 9 rocket. And inside that cylinder will be the 34 Starlink satellites on tonight's mission. This satellite weighs about 1.5 metric tons. It's about 3,300 pounds. But what's unique about this satellite is it will unfurl an antenna array in orbit to an area of 693 square feet. That's about 64 square meters. It'll be the largest commercial antenna array in orbit, in low Earth orbit, when fully deployed. And again, this large antenna is needed to connect up with the relatively small antennas on existing cell phones. So it's a space-to-cell phone connectivity satellite. And this Blue Walker 3 is the prototype for AST Space Mobile's planned network of 168 satellites to provide connectivity to existing unmodified cell phones via satellite. We spoke with Scott Wisniewski, who's the Chief Strategy Officer from AST Space Mobile earlier today. He told us a little more about this mission.
Okay, I'm here with Scott Wisniewski, the Chief Strategy Officer for AST Space Mobile, who's launching their Blue Walker 3 satellite on tonight's Falcon 9 mission. Can you tell us a little bit about what this satellite will be doing?
Sure, happy to, and thanks for having us. Blue Walker 3 is going to be the largest commercially deployed communications array in the low Earth orbit ever. It's 693 square feet, and it's designed to test our direct-to-cell phone cellular broadband architecture. We are a company founded on the desire to build cellular broadband direct from space. We've been at it since 2017, and this satellite is designed to connect directly with cell phones, regular cell phones, unmodified cell phones on the ground, and we'll be doing testing on that in the coming months.
And this satellite will be launched, with a stack of Starlink satellites, and then will be deployed from the Falcon 9 rocket. Can you kind of walk us through, like, after it's deployed from the launch vehicle? I'm assuming it has to unfurl this large array of antenna array. Can you talk to us about how that happens, when it happens after the launch, and then some of the testing you'll actually be doing, some specifics there if you have those?
Sure. So we've got some really cool pictures of the satellite, both packed up and unfolded in our factory in Texas. But you can see those pictures on Twitter or YouTube channel. But now it's currently packed, and it's on the Falcon 9 right now. This satellite, will be released within an hour after launch. Once it reaches its target altitude of about 513 kilometers. We'll be looking to make contact with it shortly thereafter. And in the coming days and weeks, we'll be making further contact with the spacecraft, bring things online, and within the next 2 months, hopefully sooner, we'll be able to unfold the satellite. The unfolding process itself is pretty straightforward. Basically, we've compressed the satellite into a cube, and it opens up in two dimensions using the stored energy of hinges that have kind of packed it together. And what opens up is an array of antenna elements pointing down towards the Earth and solar elements pointing up at the sun. And there's 148 individual identical elements that are connected through these mechanical hinges. And we'll start doing testing on those. And I think for us, the unfolding within the first couple weeks, within the 2-month period, is going to be a critical milestone. And then after that, we'll be doing calibration and then start making phone calls.
And this is a pathfinder for a future constellation of operational satellites, if I understand it correctly. How big of a constellation are you talking about, and when will those start launching?
Yeah, so this is all part of our plan to build 168 satellites globally. This mission, in addition to doing the things that I talked about, kind of turning it on, The actual mission is to, over the 6 months, once it gets going, do testing with over 10 mobile network operators globally across all 6 continents, including Vodafone, Orange, AT&T. And our objective is to calibrate their network so that we can interconnect with them. And our architecture, just like all cell towers, connects to phones directly, and then it connects back to the core for our mobile network operators. So that calibration will be important. We'll be doing that together with the MNOs, as well as folks that are helping us on the equipment technology side on the ground, like Rakuten and Nokia. And this is all, first step. We'll be launching 5 more satellites late next year, and on the path to 168 satellites in total. We've importantly broken down our network so that we can launch it incrementally, so we can provide service as we go. So it's not all one big network or nothing. So as we launch 20, 45, and then the final 60 satellites, we're able to sell services on those various networks in various geographies. So it's a super flexible system where we wholesale capacity to the mobile network operator and ultimately use them and their customers and their spectrum to offer that service to end users around the world.
And I think it's important to point out, you're talking about unmodified cell phones, so like cell phones that you and I have, basically.
Yeah, that's right. So the satellite communications industry today has sat phone companies, of course. That's a pretty small market. It's about $2 billion in revenue a year. It has folks that sell broadband, whether to maritime or aviation or to home broadband. And that's a tens of billions of dollars global market. The wireless services to cell phones, it's a $1 trillion market. There's 5 billion phones around the world. Many people have multiple devices. Connectivity and the demand for connectivity is insatiable, right? So for us as a company, we're very different in that we were founded, developed all of our patents, 2,400 patent pending claims around connecting directly to the phone that is unmodified, that is today. So the phone does not need new frequencies. It does not need new antennas. It is the phone that is in operation in the US, that's in operation in the UK, in Nigeria, in Australia, in Japan. And that's critical because our business model is to partner with the mobile network operator and allow them to send a text to their users when they're out of service and just simply click yes. And then they'll have access to cellular broadband, 4G and 5G. So it's a very elegant and business model and approach. And it's also critical because building a global company in space is a very hard challenge. And by partnering with folks like Vodafone, who's the largest cell carrier globally outside of China, and American Tower, who's the largest cell tower company in the world, both of whom are on our board and have invested in us twice. These are really, really important partners. Vodafone, in fact, we have a mutual exclusivity in all 24 of their countries globally, in Europe and in Africa. So for us, having the right partners is a critical solution because we're focused on the technology and the network.
I've heard this kind of described as like cell towers in space. Is that an accurate description? Do you like that?
Yeah, there's a couple different elements that a cell tower does. And a cell tower, of course, is a distributed network. The point of our network is that it's in space and can cover vast areas. So it can be, it makes sense to offer service where there's not a cell tower. It doesn't make sense to have a distributed network either because of population density or difficult terrain or just certain frequencies haven't been lit up yet. But basically, we've taken the top of the cell tower. That functionality is now on our satellite. Equipment at the base of the tower, we still use on the ground, but we've pulled it back to the mobile network operators headquarters, and that connects with their core. So we've tried to mirror cellular architecture as much as possible, and that's what facilitates our ability to interconnect and send service directly to unmodified phones. It was a critical foundational element for our business and very critical to make sure that we're not only have access to certain phones or certain customers. We want to be as broad as possible, and the technology supports that.
We've seen a couple of announcements recently from SpaceX and T-Mobile, and then Apple and Globalstar about similar technology. What's different about your technology, or is it you're all kind of going to the same market here? Yeah,
well, we think certainly all the extra attention speaks to the viability of the technology and the size of the market opportunity, one that we've been chasing since 2017. That's why we have agreements and understandings with 25 different mobile network operators globally that cover 1.8 billion subscribers, including Vodafone that I mentioned previously. And so, yeah, the direct-to-cell opportunity is a very, very interesting one. It's one that has become increasingly understood to be first possible and then and then 2, executable and a large opportunity. But importantly, we have a large satellite on the launch pad going up tonight. That in this business and in this technology, having a larger satellite is important to connect to the phone without difficulty, because the phone is pretty weak, both in terms of antenna strength and battery power. So so we're starting to see more folks look at this problem. We like our partners, we like our patents, we like our approach, and importantly, we're going to be putting up the largest communications array into low Earth orbit that's ever been done commercially. So it's very critical both to connect to a phone without difficulty, and then also to put good bandwidth, good throughput to the phone. So similar approach, but we're the only one who's targeting cellular broadband and 4G and 5G.
And before I let you go, I know there have been some concerns raised about the brightness of some of these satellites, not just yours, but also the Starlink satellites in low Earth orbit. Do you have any mitigations in place on this satellite, or are you planning anything on your future operational missions to try to reduce the reflectivity, or do you have any estimates how bright they'll be?
This is an industry issue for low Earth orbit, right? And the good news is that we only plan to do 168 satellites, so that the main supporting factor for us is that we have very limited impact just because of the number of satellites we're putting up. But ultimately, there's specialized materials and there's ways you can mitigate the brightness, and that's something that we're actively investigating for our commercial satellites.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Scott, for joining us, and good luck with the launch tonight. Thanks
so much. Good talking to you. Take care. Bye.
That was Scott Wisniewski, the Chief Strategy Officer of AST Space Mobile, talking about Blue Walker 3, which is one of the satellites inside the payload compartment of the Falcon 9 rocket, now 19 minutes, 9 seconds from tonight's launch. In the last minute or so, we've seen the start of the so-called big vent. This is the vent from the strong back of vapor, signifying the start of chill down of liquid oxygen lines leading up the strong back into the second stage. This is in preparation for loading of liquid oxygen into the second stage, beginning in about 2.5 minutes or so. We also heard a call that the RP1 load, kerosene fuel load onto stage 2 is complete. So the countdown continues right on schedule for tonight's launch attempt at 9:20 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:20 a.m. UTC.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
Now, T-minus 16 minutes, 15 seconds. We just heard the call that Stage 2 LOX load has started, so this is the start of liquid oxygen loading onto the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. The countdown remains on schedule for 9:20 p.m. liftoff. That's 1:20 a.m. UTC. The payloads on tonight's mission include that Blue Walker 3 satellite we've discussed a little bit earlier, as well as 34 more Starlink internet satellites. If you're just joining us, you're watching a live view of the Falcon 9 rocket now being loaded with propellants at Launch Complex 39A. I'm Stephen Clark, editor of SpaceflightNow.com, reporting live on tonight's countdown from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We're about 3 miles away from the launch pad this evening. If you haven't had a chance to do so yet, please like our stream. That helps us reach a bigger audience and bring this coverage to more viewers. Also, if you're interested, please consider joining our YouTube channel. We have membership levels available for you to choose from, and depending on which tier you select, you can gain access to exclusive video features, and you'll be helping us support our coverage, so we hope you'll consider that. You can also contribute to our coverage and help us continue to bring you coverage like tonight's if you support us in the Super Chat function on YouTube. We would really appreciate any support you can provide there. We're now 15 minutes from liftoff. This is the 41st SpaceX launch of the year, and it's also the 39th launch of the year from Cape Canaveral or the Kennedy Space Center. Tonight's launch also marks the 175th flight of a Falcon 9 rocket since its debut back in June of 2010. So the 175th flight of a Falcon 9 overall, and the 41st Falcon 9 launch of 2022. Now 12 minutes, 13 seconds from liftoff. We talked about AST Space Mobile's Blue Walker 3 satellite a few minutes ago, but the other satellites on board include 34 more spacecraft poised to join SpaceX's Starlink Internet network. This will bring the total number of Starlink satellites launched to 3,293. So this file photo from our previous missions shows what a stack of Starlink satellites looks like in launch configuration. This stack of Starlink satellites is roughly 50 satellites. So tonight's mission will be a stack of Starlinks that is somewhat shorter at 34 satellites. They're packed on one on top of the other, held down onto the launch adapter with retention rods. And for tonight's mission, the Blue Walker 3 satellite from AST is actually mounted on top of the stack of Starlink satellites. We talked about Blue Walker 3 a few minutes ago. We showed the picture of it in launch configuration. This is what the antenna array looks like fully unfurled. So there are 148 individual elements to this array, all connected together with hinges into a cube configuration. And in the first couple of months after launch, sometime later this fall, once the conditions are right, AST will send the command to deploy this antenna array to 693 square feet. This is the largest communications antenna array ever deployed in low Earth orbit at an altitude of about 300 miles. So this is a rather large antenna. You can see the scale of it with the ground team there for reference. And this will provide direct space to cell phone connectivity. This is a prototype for a planned constellation of 168 spacecraft that AST is developing. And there are concerns among the astronomy community about the brightness of this satellite, the reflectivity of this array, especially around twilight, at dawn and dusk, as it catches sunlight and potentially reflects that down to the Earth. And we'll see how bright this is. There's no estimate that we've seen of how bright this spacecraft will be, but a lot of eyes will be watching it when it deploys this array sometime later this fall. We won't have an idea of how bright it is shortly after launch because it won't have deployed. But that information should come later this year with the deployment and unfurling of this antenna array. So back to the Starlink satellites. There are 34 on tonight's mission, heading up to an operational orbit of 335 miles, 540 kilometers. Each of these satellites is flat-packed on the Falcon 9, weighs about a quarter ton, and they are built by SpaceX in Redmond, Washington, near Seattle. Of course, if you're not familiar, this is what a ground terminal for the Starlink network looks like. So Starlink consumers, if they sign up for the service, can get an antenna like this and pay a monthly subscription fee for internet connectivity, internet service through the Starlink fleet. Right now, SpaceX says there are 40 countries where the Starlink service is available. The most recent country where it's been added is Malta. Now, 9 minutes from launch, we're now inside the final 9 minutes of the countdown this evening. The next major milestone will come at T-minus 7 minutes. That's when the Merlin engines on the bottom of the the main stage of the Falcon 9 will be thermally conditioned for ignition. That's coming up at T-minus 7 minutes. As you can see here in this countdown timeline, we've passed the first few milestones. Propellant loading started at 35 minutes. Liquid oxygen on stage 2 began flowing at 16 minutes. And then at 5.5 minutes, we should hear a call that the RP1 or kerosene fuel load is complete on both stages. And at T-minus 4 minutes and 30 seconds or so, the strongback structure, the mast to the right side of the Falcon 9, will begin its retraction to an angle of about 1.5 degrees from the vehicle. That's the position it will stay in until ignition, when it begins a more rapid retraction to allow the Falcon 9 to climb off the pad. At T-minus 2 minutes, the final liquid oxygen will be loaded into the vehicle, and the Falcon 9 will be declared fully loaded, fully fueled for launch at about T-minus 2 minutes. At T-minus 1 minute, the onboard computer on the Falcon 9 will take command of the countdown. Propellant tanks will be pressurized for flight. The launch director will verify their go for launch at about 45 seconds. And then at T-minus 3 seconds, the engine controller will command the ignition sequence for all 9 Merlin engines on the bottom of the first stage of the Falcon 9. Those will throttle up to about 1.7 million pounds of thrust collectively. And if they pass a health check, an automated health check, the onboard computer will give the command for liftoff at T0. After liftoff, the Falcon 9 will be heading northeast from the Kennedy Space Center, from the Launch Complex 39A area. This red band shows the expected ground track tonight. The first stage, booster 1058, will be landing on the drone ship a shortfall of gravitas positioned east of Charleston, South Carolina. That's where the first stage will attempt its landing to complete its 14th mission tonight. We just heard a confirmation at T-minus 7 minutes of engine chill down. So the Falcon 9's engines are being thermally conditioned for flight at this time. This involves flowing liquid oxygen through the engine compartment into the engine components themselves to make sure that they are at the proper temperature for the flow, the more rapid flow of propellants at T0 when those engines ignite. Now T-minus 6 minutes, 10 seconds, and counting.
Stage 1 RP1 load is complete.
And there's the call a bit earlier than usual of the Stage 1 RP1 load complete. So about 46,000 gallons of kerosene have been loaded into the rocket this evening. Liquid oxygen still flowing into the vehicle for another few more minutes.
Falcon tanks are pressing for strong back retract.
Now 3.5 minutes to go. 3 minutes,
Strong back
30
retract.
seconds. The strong back out at pad 39A is retracting away from the vehicle at this time. Everything continuing to look good for liftoff this evening, 9:20 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:20 a.m. UTC.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete. And Stage 1 pogo.
Now 2 minutes to go, 2 minutes left until the launch of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket from pad 39A here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
We've heard Stage 2 LOX load complete, so the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with about 1 million pounds of propellants, awaiting liftoff in 1 minute 34 seconds. T-minus 90 seconds.
Ground gas closeout.
coming up on T-minus 60 seconds. And 1 minute before launch, the control of the countdown will pass from the ground computer to the onboard computer of the Falcon 9 rocket. T-minus 60 seconds. That handoff should be occurring now. And we've heard Falcon 9 is in startup, so the Falcon 9's onboard computer is now in control of the rest of the countdown. We should hear a final go from the launch director momentarily. We've heard that go from the launch director. Everything looking good. 35 seconds. T-minus 20. Engine start should occur at T-minus 3 seconds. T-minus 10 seconds. T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And liftoff of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket from Launch Complex 39A, hauling more Starlink satellites into orbit, and AST Space Mobile's Blue Walker 3 satellite. Falcon 9 heading downrange, heading northeast from the Kennedy Space Center. Everything looking good 20 seconds into the flight. One minute, 20 seconds into the flight. We hope you enjoyed some of that rumble from the Merlin engines. Those engines are producing about 1.7 million pounds of thrust as the Falcon 9 heads northeast from NASA's Kennedy Space Center, now arcing out over the Atlantic Ocean. It's passed through a thin layer of cloud cover, but we're still having some good visibility of the vehicle. T plus 1 minute, 50 seconds. At about 2.5 minutes, about 30 seconds from now, we'll see a series of events in quick succession. We'll see main engine cutoff, or MECO, of the first stage. A few seconds later, we should see stage separation. The first stage will begin its descent back toward the drone ship, and then the upper stage will light its Merlin vacuum engine for the first of 5 burns of that engine planned for tonight's mission. A very complex upper stage profile tonight. Standing by for main engine cutoff. And we've seen main engine cutoff. Standing by for staging. And there's stage separation. We're watching views now from onboard cameras from SpaceX. We've switched over to SpaceX's video stream for now. This comes with a few seconds delay, and we've seen confirmation of engine start. Second stage engine start. So the Merlin vacuum engine has ignited for the first of its 5 burns this evening. Both vehicles reported to be on nominal trajectories from SpaceX. Now 3.5 minutes into the flight. Falcon 9's upper stage now has accelerated past 9,100 kilometers per hour at an altitude of 115 kilometers. Those numbers evident displayed on the lower right. On the lower left is stage 1 telemetry. So the booster is now decelerating after completing its burn. It'll be reaching apogee, or the highest point of its ballistic trajectory, and then begin its descent back into the atmosphere. This map shows the relative locations of the Stage 2 and Stage 1 vehicles. Stage 1 heading toward the drone ship, Stage 2 continuing to accelerate up to orbital velocity.
Acquisition of signal, Bermuda.
A downrange tracking station in Bermuda has received and acquired signals from the Falcon 9 as it continues to head northeast from the Kennedy Space Center. Now 6 minutes into the flight of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 4-2 Blue Walker 3 mission. No problems reported so far since the liftoff from the Kennedy Space Center, which occurred at 9:20 p.m. Eastern Time.
Entry burn startup.
The first stage has reignited 3 of its engines for an entry burn. This is a braking burn to slow down for re-entry deeper into the atmosphere. And we've seen entry burn shut down. One more burn left on the first stage. That'll be a landing burn using just the center engine, beginning about 30 seconds or so before touchdown. 7 minutes into the flight. See stage 2 is passing between Bermuda and the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Stage 1 in the final minute to minute and a half of its flight, heading for the drone ship.
Stage 1 transonic. Expected loss of signal, Cape. Stage 2 terminal guidance. Stage 1 landing burn.
And we've heard landing burn ignition is underway on this first stage. Booster 1058 heading for the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas out in the Atlantic Ocean. Let's watch the first stage as it heads for touchdown.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there it is. Booster 1058 has arrived on the drone ship. A shortfall of gravitas out in the Atlantic Ocean. This completes this booster's 14th flight, a record for SpaceX's fleet of reusable boosters. Great view here from the drone ship.
Nominal parking orbit insertion.
Showing the booster on the deck after a successful launch and landing this evening. In the meantime, we've heard confirmation that the upper stage has completed its first burn this evening. This is the first of 5 engine firings on stage 2 tonight. 4 of those are needed to place the satellites into 2 different orbits. Another one, the 5th and final burn, will be the deorbit burn on the second stage. So the second stage with its payloads has arrived in a parking orbit. Another burn is scheduled in about 36 minutes. That'll be a very brief 4-second maneuver to set the stage for deployment of AST's Blue Walker 3 satellite at about T+50 minutes. 2 more burns after that will lower the altitude of the second stage to set up for deployment of the 34 Starlink satellites about 2 hours and 4 minutes into the mission. That'll be at about 11:24 p.m. Eastern Time, 3:24 a.m. UTC for the final major event on tonight's flight. Now 11.5 minutes into tonight's flight, SpaceX has ended their webcast this evening, so we don't expect to get any more live video from the Falcon 9 rocket. However, the mission is far from complete, with an unprecedented number of burns on the second stage engine still to go tonight.
Expected loss of signal, Bermuda.
If SpaceX follows their usual practice, we'll continue to have access to their launch control audio, and we'll bring that to you on this stream throughout the rest of the mission as the second stage completes its critical milestones to place these payloads into 2 different orbits tonight. The second stage now passing just off the coast of Newfoundland. It'll be heading out over the North Atlantic Ocean and then over Europe before swinging southeast over the Indian Ocean. So again, 3 more burns still to go on the second stage before the final spacecraft deployment event, and then following that, another burn by the upper stage will deorbit that rocket to help prevent the creation of any unnecessary space junk from tonight's flight. Next major burn is about 35 minutes away at about T+47 minutes.